Welcome to the Geek 101 podcast, Road to Arrowverse Crisis, Episode 5, Arrow Season 5, Flash Season 3. I'm your host, Andy Bowman, and with me, as always, are Tessa and Sam. How's it going, guys?
It's going great.
I've always wanted to be a with you as always person, so that's great.
Yep.
You're making Sam's dreams come true.
It's happening.
You bumped from guest star to reoccurring.
You've made it to the big time.
We will be the Garth to your Wayne on this road to crisis.
The 1,000 people who download this podcast will now recognize your name.
Hey, that's like 995 more than before, so we're doing all right.
So, Arrow Season 5. Deep breaths, guys.
So very tired. That's what we should call that season.
Full disclosure to anyone listening, I hate watched most of Season 5. So I don't have a lot good to say about Season 5. I don't know if Andy and Sam have a lot good to say about Season 5 of Arrow. I remember thinking, is this the season that I finally stopped watching? But then, of course, they pulled me right back in with that last episode, so I did not stop watching after Season 5. But this is not a great season. I think that you two agree with me on that.
This is the first season we watched together, isn't it?
I think so. I think this was the first season
it's
we
really
watched
sad
together.
that it's this bad.
It was really quite terrible.
I think that there are points of this season that play in its favor. First of all, we're coming off of Arrow Season 4. So the flashbacks immediately are better.
That's true. The Russia conceit was better than the sort of space filler flashbacks that we got in Season 4. Not like maybe much better, but better.
Right. Now, David Nichol as Anatoly is also much more prevalent in this season, which makes me quite happy.
It's always fun every time we get to see him.
Yeah, and you know what? I enjoyed Adrian Chase as Prometheus.
No, I thought you were going to say you like Constantine. Okay. Adrian Chase was fun.
I'm trying to think of other good things to say about the... this was the first season that introduced kind of the new upcoming Team Arrow with fan favorite Ragman and other fan favorite, I'm assuming fan favorite, Artemis and Curtis Holt as Mr. Terrific. So let's just talk a little bit about where these characters are at the beginning of the season, because Season 4 ended with the Hood pretty much being a hero. Right?
Yeah, so like we talked about last time, Season 4 ends with Oliver. He's the Green Arrow now. He's a hero because he's saved the city from Damien Dark, a populist hero. He made a very impassioned speech at the end of Season 4, which apparently means that he's mayor now. I don't really know how the mechanics of everything worked in that last episode.
Yeah, apparently, if you're a successful vigilante, you become mayor. That is a law. It's in the Constitution. It's real.
The little known Article 6.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's mayor now. And that's like the beginning of this season. The big thing that happens at the end of Season 4, of course, as well, is that Diggle leaves the team. The team breaks up. So Diggle leaves the team. He goes back to the military because he's still dealing with fallout from the storyline with his brother in Season 4. And Thea leaves because she feels as if she's too addicted to the adrenaline rush, to the results of the Lazarus Pit, and she wants to figure out who she is outside of, being a vigilante. And so she quits that team, but is still on Oliver's mayoral team. It's hard to say exactly what she does in the mayor's office. Is she just like professional sister?
She's the one who does all the work.
Yeah. Yeah, she does all the work.
She's the administrative assistant.
That seems like a very gendered way of saying she does all the work.
Sorry, it's executive assistant.
Executive assistant.
Oh, sorry, we saw The Good Place, so I guess that's where that is.
Yeah.
Vice president of helping.
Also, Laurel's dead, so everyone kind of feels bad.
So she left the team.
So she left the team.
Yes.
And then Quentin Lance is the deputy mayor. He is no longer a detective.
Because that is also a clear path for promotion, going from detective to deputy mayor. That makes sense.
So, yeah, and I think Felicity's the only one who's still on Team Arrow, like from the original team from last season and from previous seasons. I think it's just Felicity and Oliver at the very beginning.
And she wants him to build another team.
Mm-hmm.
And so he does, eventually.
Because he will do anything Felicity says.
Well, it's essentially a situation where Felicity says to do something, and he says no 17 times, realizes he's wrong, and then regretfully or reluctantly does the thing that she's been saying to do the whole time.
So we get this sort of like the beginning of the season, which is part of the reason I think I disliked it initially, is we get this influx of new characters. And I already thought there were way too many characters on Arrow, but apparently I was proven wrong at the beginning of this season. Because we get
Renee.
Is it 3 new characters?
We get Renee, who I think we agree is the best of the new characters.
Yes, and I actually like him better as the season. I did not like him at the beginning of the season. I liked him better as the season.
Well, you are documented as hating anyone who is not white, so.
Yeah, that's something that's
what happens.
classically me. But no, I didn't like him at the beginning because to me he just kind of read as like this wild card, just kind of go shoot first,
Mad Dog.
Questions. Yeah, he's called Mad Dog, and he's decided. So his whole story is he was inspired by Oliver when Oliver killed Damien Dark to become a vigilante, and he decided the best way to do this was to wear hockey gear,
a hockey mask, yeah,
and to shoot people. And to me, that's just not a great attitude to take when approaching vigilantism.
But is it better or worse than also Ran Curtis, who is now a member of New Team Arrow as well, Mr. Terrific with his fair play jacket?
Okay, here's the thing, and we'll talk more about Curtis later. Curtis, I actually think, was a very underutilized character. This and other seasons. I think Curtis had the potential to be a really great character, but was ultimately not given enough to do.
Except make magic balls.
Yeah, the problem was they couldn't really agree on what his contribution to the team would be. Is he the new Felicity? Like, is he a hacker? Does he perform like the magic technological services that we've seen in the past? Or is he like someone who actually goes out in a hood and fights people based on his Olympic prowess? Like he was an Olympian, so that means he can fight people now. So it was very unclear from the very beginning how they were going to try to use this character, and then eventually they allow him to make the balls, the T-spheres. Is that what they're called?
I like magic balls better. I'm sorry.
And they can do anything, like whatever the episode requires. These balls can do, and I'm using the word balls very, very tellingly here. But like it's hard to get away from them. They're kind of ridiculous and not in like a good campy sort of way. But Curtis himself as a character is really interesting. Like the idea that he is a black man, he is a black gay man, and he is, in this physical role that we don't usually get to see from like the nerdy character in these types of things. And that could have been really interesting if they had actually given him more storylines than they did, I think, this season. Instead, he's sort of relegated to this supporting role where he just kind of... I think the biggest story he has this season is that his husband just figures out that he's a vigilante and leaves him. And that's it. That's like all of the character development we get for Curtis this season. Is that right? Does anyone remember anything else he does this season?
Pretty much. He wants to become part of the team and is punished, which is a recurring theme. If you decide to be a vigilante, you will be punished in your personal life, but it did kind of seem like a low blow for Curtis.
Yeah,
Poor
and we
Curtis.
don't. Yeah, it's just I don't know. He wasn't given enough, and it's not even like the problem is there was just too many characters. You couldn't give them all stuff to do.
Well, we haven't even gotten to the other two yet.
Yeah. So I mean, the other thing with Renee, we'll return to Renee for a second, so I can finish off his description, is that he's sort of this like a guy from the hood, I guess. Like he's from the Glades, and he's sort of rough around the edges. He calls a lot of people hoss. Especially Lance, which is great.
Who really enjoys it.
Later in the season. And we find out, about halfway through the season that he is in the middle of a custody battle because his wife was killed by a drug dealer. And he was declared unfit to take care of his daughter. And that's a really compelling storyline. Like, that was something I was actually really interested in this season. Is this...
And when that storyline plays out, Lance kind of almost, it looks like, because his daughters are dead. Well, one's not dead anymore, but he's had so much loss. It's almost like he's going to be a surrogate son for Lance, and that storyline is gone after this season pretty much. But
yeah, I mean, like, I think what works for Renee as a character, Renee Ramirez, that's his last name. I think what really works for him is that his chemistry with other characters is really great. He's someone who challenges Oliver quite a bit because he thinks he's edgier than Oliver until he's proven wrong on several occasions. And so he's willing to, like, bring stuff up to people. He's willing to stand his ground on things. And he's actually got this, like, personal pain that doesn't really, I mean, I guess you could call the death of his wife fridging, but it doesn't just come from, like, the death of his wife. It also comes from, him trying to get his daughter back, him not being trusted by the system, right? All of the interactions he has with the criminal justice system, who just assume he's a thug. And I think that makes him maybe a little bit more compelling than, say, Ragman, who I think we should talk about next.
Well, first of all, I do want to say one thing about Mad Dog that I really don't like is, like, playing into the angry minority character. Like, you have Diggle who's pretty even-headed most of the time, and Curtis who is almost incapable of being angry. And then you have the other minority character, ethnic minority at least, who just is kind of uncontrollable, and he's called Mad Dog. And I know Mad Dog is a character in the comics and all that. It's just kind of awkward.
Well, I think maybe that's why he gets better over time. Because, yeah, I felt very similarly when I started watching this. But especially in the last season of Arrow, which I know we're not talking about yet, I really liked Renee a lot more than I initially liked him. And so I think maybe he just gets better the more he gets fleshed out as a character.
And to your point, Andy, about him being a character in the comics, Tessa has a thing later on when we're talking about Flash about Killer Frost. Just because she's written one way in the comic doesn't mean she needs to be the same way in the TV show, which ultimately hurts the series. And maybe it's the same way with Mad Dog.
And that's true. I'm less familiar with Mad Dog as a character than I am.
Incredibly unfamiliar with him.
So some people may have watched this and really loved the characterization here. I think he's better over time. As I think he's also better when we realize the worse the other characters are. How much worse they are as characters.
Okay, well, let's talk about Ragman then.
Ragman. Does anyone want to Ragman? Does anyone want to explain him? Ragman. I barely remember him. Someone's going to have to remind me.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but he is his character arc is ultimately defined by the fact that those nuclear missiles that were at the end of last season, one of them got redirected instead of. That's what Felicity did, right? Instead of having it explode over Star City or onto or in, she directed it to a safe distance away.
Called Haven Rock.
Well, that didn't work out. It was not a very good haven, was it?
Well, the idea is that she she couldn't deflect it all together, so she chose a place that had less people in it
Right.
As opposed to more people.
And so
but people still died.
And so Ragman's family were those less people.
Right. Ragman was the only survivor. His name's actually Rory Regan. So, might have some relation to Joe Regan.
And he is a meta.
I don't know. No, he has a special Jewish garment.
Yeah, his power is religious or magical.
Right. Right. He has that cloak. The rags, okay. And that's why I brought up him being Jewish earlier, is they try to make this a big thing about his character, but instead of fleshing it out, they just are like, oh yeah, he's Jewish and his powers come from him being from some Hebraic mysticism that basically make him look kind of like Scarecrow from the Christopher Nolan films. Like a bunch of rags are on him, and he can extend it, and it's
See, his powers kind of reminded me of what is her name from the Inhumans?
Yeah,
the
Medusa.
Girl with the hair. Medusa, yeah. So it reminds me of that, right? Like it's a magical garment, but it can kind of do anything. Like it stretches out and it does different things independently of him, sort of. Right?
Yeah. It's ultimately he's a character who I don't know if maybe the actor couldn't pull it off, but when he finds out that Felicity killed his family and whatnot, he seems so childish about his anger. Right? Like that's how I took it, is he seems almost like he's pouting instead of being angry for all the right reasons. I guess that makes sense.
How long does he actually last? Because he leaves
on the episode Bratva. No, it's
Is it later in the season?
Yeah.
This tells you how much I remember this character. I don't think he had a lot to do either.
Oh wow. No, you're the one who's right. Yeah, he leaves pretty much at the halfway point. I thought it was closer, but basically his magic rags stop working and he's gonna go find out why. That's the entire thing.
Yeah, I think the big question this season, because I really think the big question this season is how much did they know what they were doing, and how much were they just throwing cool ideas at the wall and seeing if they could stick? Because I feel like Ragman was like, this is a good idea, let's introduce this character. Oh, this character isn't working. I guess we'll just have him leave.
Well, I think this is one of those big picture problems or things you kind of figure at this point that all the major players are in place, that somebody was thinking about Crisis. I think probably by this point in the Arrowverse. And, because the crossovers are becoming a bigger thing, and like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't thinking about it already. But then the big thing in Arrow this season is the flashbacks are coming to an end. They clearly had a 5-year plan, that we want to tell the story for 5 years, and we want to have that payoff of Oliver being rescued now that we know his full, story. It's almost like the Supernatural, it could have ended very early. We had a stopping point. We knew where we were going, and then they kept the show going. Except here, with Arrow, they maybe had these big ideas for the greater Arrowverse and, an idea for the flashbacks, but it doesn't seem like this season in the present was mapped out very well at all.
Yeah. And as far as other new characters that are introduced, and there are a few more, we have Evelyn Sharp as Artemis. Since Thea's no longer Speedy for most of this, we need a small female archer to follow Oliver around.
And she serves double duty as the inevitable betrayer.
Yeah.
There has to be one.
The thing about Evelyn Sharp that I thought was interesting was she was actually introduced in season 4. I don't know if you all remember. We didn't talk about it, but when Laurel dies in season 4, there's an episode. I think it's called Canaries.
Yes, that's right.
Where like this person starts running around in the Black Canary costume, and she's committing these crimes, and they find out that it's Evelyn Sharp. And like her whole deal, I don't remember the exact storyline, but it's something like she's trying to get revenge for her parents, and she's taking on the Black Canary costume as a way of signaling that she's doing justice. But all it ends up doing is making people question whether Black Canary is actually a vigilante or a criminal. And Oliver and gang end up rescuing her and convincing her this is not the way. And so it's interesting seeing her here, considering the fact that she was introduced to us as a villain in season 4. It almost is like they wanted us to know what was going to happen in season 5, with her eventually turning on the team.
Right. I think also she's another Olympian. Or like competitive archery person. Like she has something that like yeah, she has something about her that makes her seem she did decathlons. So she was class president and she did academic decathlons and all these things, and then all of a sudden her parents get killed and she goes off to fight crime. A star gymnast.
Yeah, I mean, this all makes sense. It's interesting that besides, I mean, you pointed out Ragman's not really a metahuman, but it is interesting that out of all of these new characters on the new team right now, that none of them are metahumans. Like, they're all...
That brings us to the metahuman.
Right, but she's not introduced until later in the season.
Right. I think she was introduced once Ragman was written out.
I think it's episode 14. Yeah, it's like the set. You're right. It's the exact episode after Ragman gets written out. Yeah, we have Dinah, who is
Dinah,
the new Black Canary. Yay!
But the actual Black Canary.
Yes. She first of all, she has the actual Black Canary's name, Dinah, and second of all,
how common of a name is Dinah?
Well, Laurel's name is Dinah.
That's what I'm saying.
Right? Like we find, like you're reminded of that when you see her gravestone, right? It's like her.
It's Dinah Laurel Lance.
Yeah. Like, by the way, guys, don't get so upset. Her name was Dinah too. But she's dead, so it doesn't matter.
Oh man. Okay. Yeah, she's introduced. It seems almost like Oliver might hook up with her.
Oh yeah, for anyone following the Olicity roller coaster that is this show now, Oliver and Felicity are broken up for the majority of this season.
So and it is truly like a county fair roller coaster. You do not want to get on that. It's not good to look at. It's probably going to break. You'll hurt yourself. Make sure you have a tetanus shot.
Yeah. So the big thing about this entire season that I absolutely like, I really enjoyed is you're introduced to the character Adrian Chase, who is, attorney, the district attorney, working very closely with Oliver Queen, and there's this mysterious villain named Prometheus who starts out as the throwing star killer, and it's very obvious to pretty much everyone right away that it's the only other new character that they've introduced.
Right, and the thing about it is like you hear that same musical cue every time he's around. So I mean, like, you know what I'm talking about, Andy? You know the musical cue for Prometheus? You don't.
It's like,
wow.
I don't know a lot about music, unfortunately, or at least how they produce soundtracks, but it is one of the more like every villain in the Arrowverse has a musical cue. Prometheus's is like the most annoying musical cue, and that's all I can really tell you about it. Like, I don't know how they produced it. Like, is it wind chimes?
No, it's a synthesizer, I'm fairly sure. But we were in Sam's one time shopping, and somebody around Christmas time, and there was a kid's toy on the other side of the store that made vaguely the same noise, and I was about ready to like duck and cover. I was worried that Prometheus was coming after us. That is how much hardwired that particular cue is in my brain.
Like, they really want you to hear that musical cue. Like, it probably pops up like 4 or 5 times at least an episode. Like, I don't know. Like, maybe they did that for all the other ones too, but they just weren't as noticeable as this one.
Well, it's supposed to be like the musical equivalent of like a pinwheel. Like when you look at it, you kind of get hypnotized a little bit, because like this is like Prometheus is like Oliver's worst nightmare, because he makes him confront like his mirror self.
Yeah, and they try to make him like Slade Wilson, where he's involved in every aspect of Oliver's life and just slowly kind of picking it apart. But it never really... I mean, there's one part where Oliver, quote unquote, dies, and you find out it's the human target, which, you know, so he's just a guy who basically dies for a living, kind of. And
yeah, and also I was really upset that Human Target was not played by Mark Valley, who had
right the
short-term run as the Human Target on Fox.
Yeah. I enjoy Mark Valley, so he's really good in Boston Legal.
Yes, great guy.
So I will say my bright point of this entire season was Earth 2 Laurel playing Black Siren. And maybe you two disagree with me on this, but I think that Katie Cassidy has so much more fun playing Black Siren than she ever did playing Earth 1 Laurel Lance.
Hey guys, let's not tell Quentin about the multiverse or the fact that there are like infinite versions of his daughter out there, and that one of them might happen upon him in a dark alley one day. Let's not tell him about that. That's a great
Especially
idea.
when we know she's on this Earth and is trapped.
Yeah. I mean, because, we're introduced to her in the last season of Flash, right? She's a one-off villain that Zoom brings over from Earth 2. And the Flash do they keep her in the metahuman prison?
I thought
for a while?
I thought so.
Yeah, but then she, like, escapes and goes to Star City, because why wouldn't she? And
because
then,
Adrian Chase is such a cool villain, everybody wants to work for him.
And then, so we get these like confrontations, right? We get an episode where Oliver has to confront like the fact that she's not Earth 1 Laurel, right? That she's actually Earth 2 Laurel, and that she's a villain. But she does actually have a scream, right? Which is very similar to like the canary cry that was technologically given to Earth 1 Laurel. But I don't know, like there's just something delightfully campy, I think, about Black Siren. Like I said, Katie Cassidy is just having a lot of fun playing this like very villainous, very like she's still wearing black leather, so she's kind of again that mirror image of Black Canary, but she's evil, she's a thief, she's a killer. She's very interested in convincing everybody that she's not really Laurel, but she still kind of cares about them because she knows versions of them back on her Earth. I don't know. I've always really liked what they did with this character. If they weren't going to get rid of Katie Cassidy, I thought this was a really good way of keeping her around. Is
it as good as Malcolm Merlyn showing up in the musical episode of The Flash, though?
Probably not.
No.
Nothing will ever be that good.
I mean John Barrowman, not Malcolm Merlyn, of course. But
yeah.
But Black Siren works for Prometheus.
And as well, don't forget about Nissa's sister, Talia.
No, more Batman mythos.
The season of Too Many People continues.
Yeah, so we get also Talia al Ghul. We get her in the flashbacks first, before we get her in the show. But she not only teaches Oliver more stuff on how to kill people, I guess. At this point, the continuity really breaks down because I didn't think Oliver knew about the League of Assassins before Sarah showed back up in season 2 of Arrow, but it turns out he hung out with Talia al Ghul for a while in Russia. Anyway, so there's a little continuity errors here and there if that bothers you. Although if it bothers you, I don't know why you're watching these shows. But she also shows up in the present as an ally of Prometheus because Oliver killed her father back in season 3. She's angry at Oliver, and so she's willing to back Prometheus in his desire for revenge. Is it really revenge he's after, though?
There's a lot of the enemy of my enemy is my friend on the evil team this year.
Yeah. They all hate Oliver.
And why wouldn't you?
Well, this is the time when Malcolm Merlin loses his hand too, right?
Yeah, I thought so too. Like, as I was looking at it, I think he actually loses it a season ago. I think we maybe didn't talk about that last week, but Malcolm Merlin loses a hand.
Completely. Yes. He
Yeah, like
sorry, he loses it when he is no longer Ra's al Ghul.
Yes, and Oliver Tate is the one who tops it off. So yeah, there's that. And and there's all this, like, every time Malcolm and Nyssa are in the same room, they can't, like, help but snipe at each other because of it. But yeah, Malcolm loses a hand, and so he's sort of part of this season too. He's trying to get back into Thea's life, but Thea doesn't want him there because, he hasn't been a great dad. There was so much at the end of this season.
As we get, I believe, who is it that says it in the final episode that even though Malcolm's not very good at it, he's still deep down, there's a part of him that wants to be your dad? Who says that to Thea at the end?
I feel like it's Felicity. It has to be Felicity
who
probably says that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of villains running around this season, and I think that was another issue, was that, like, there was a lot of reoccurring villains, and they were almost villains that could have commanded large sections of the show in their own right, I guess. I don't know. It was very difficult to tell why they were working together sometimes.
Right. But let's I just really want to wrap this up. So poor
Let's talk about the end.
Yeah, but first, poor Anatoly keeps trusting Oliver, keeps getting betrayed by Oliver.
Oh yeah, Oliver becomes part of the Bratva. This season. Bratva. We knew this though from season 1.
Yeah.
We were just like waiting for it to actually see it in the flashbacks.
I mean, and luckily Dolph Lundgren I thought was really good as Konstantin Kolivar. He just is campy and fun.
I think so. Here's my thing about the flashbacks this season. You're right in the sense that the actual content of the flashbacks are more interesting than they were in the previous season. The problem is that the way the flashbacks have always worked, and when they work well, is that something happens in Oliver's journey on or off the island that mirrors something that's happening in the present, right? Like, he is going through some kind of situation where he has to learn a lesson, and that lesson is applicable in the present, or he learns a lesson that he then has to unlearn in the present, right? The problem with these flashbacks is that Oliver has to learn that he's a shitty human being in Russia. And, like, the whole point of the flashbacks is that he has to accept that he's this bad person who just likes to kill people, or who has to learn how to kill people in order to accomplish his objective. The problem with that is that using that in conjunction with what Prometheus is doing in the present, which is to convince Oliver that he is a bad person, that he's basically just another serial killer who has convinced himself that he's doing the right thing, it makes it seem like Oliver has literally learned nothing in the last 5 years. Like, to me, all the flashbacks did was emphasize that Oliver has had no character growth, apparently, which I think he had over the first 4 seasons. Like, if you watch the first 4 seasons, it seems like he's had quite a bit of character growth. But if you watch season 5, it's just like, no, he learned his lesson before he got rescued, that he was a bad person, and now he has to relearn that lesson? Like, what did you guys think? Like, I think that the flashbacks did a disservice to the present storyline because they just emphasized way too many of the wrong things about Oliver as a character.
I think for somebody who says you hate watch this, you paid a lot more attention to it than I did.
That happens all the time.
I mean,
all the time.
I have to decide why I hated it so much.
It's fun because it's fun. You know, if you enjoy this as a podcast, I get like 20 hours of fresh original content a week that sounds just like this. So like, you know, it's fun. You know,
I don't know. To me, I think they shot themselves in the foot with this Prometheus storyline. I think it would have
with
been
an arrow, not a gun.
With an arrow. Yes, I think they did the same storyline again in a later season that we'll talk about, but they did it better than they did it this season. So I'll have to return to this material later, but the organization of this season was off for me.
And you know, and I think from this time, and Anatoly does, I believe, show up in subsequent seasons. Yes, he does.
Oh yeah,
right?
and Anatoly's a delight.
Anytime he shows up, he is always going to get, you know, just shit on by Oliver every time.
It bothers me so much.
And you know, honestly, when Anatoly does, you know, sabotage Oliver has it coming. But the guy who plays Anatoly and the character of Anatoly are both so delightful.
Oh yeah.
It almost doesn't matter if his character is disserviced or not. I'm just happy to see him.
Oh, and Diggle went to prison. Can we talk about that?
Diggle went to prison.
Diggle goes to prison this season.
For doing a good thing. And this is a lesson, kids. Don't do good things because the person who is above you is bad.
But yeah, Diggle goes to prison. He's in the military. He's screwed over by his commanding officer, goes to prison, and Oliver and Lila have to figure out how to break him out.
Right, and so we don't get Wentworth Miller or Dominic Purcell involved in this prison break, which is really a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, and yeah, this whole season, as far as the actual content of the season, is pretty much filler for the overall Arrowverse. What is interesting that happens is at the very end.
Ooh, people gonna die. All right.
The return of Slade Wilson.
Yay.
Yes, on Manu Bennett watch. Manu Bennett is back again. And kind of awesome. Like I'm so happy he's back, and I'm so happy the role he takes here. Because I think it really does faithfully show the relationship he had with Oliver before the Mirakuru.
Mm-hmm. Son, kid. He calls him kid.
Kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I really did hate watch this season. I mean, I put a lot of thought into why I hate watch this season, but I did hate watch it. I will say, I was so happy. Like, I became way more excited about Arrow than I had been in a long time when I saw him teased at the end of the second to last episode, the penultimate episode. And then, yeah, just to see him work with Oliver in a non-villainous way, like in a very like contrite but still like very badass sort of way. And he's actually the one that outwits Prometheus, right? At the end, like he's the one who is able to realize that Prometheus has such a beat on Oliver's psyche that he's like, okay, I'm going to pretend to betray Oliver because he won't expect that. And it's really, really interesting and just, great acting on Manu Bennett's part.
And just think, if you know, this is coming off the heels of, you know, if Batman versus Superman Yawn of Justice hadn't been such a terrible movie, we might not have ever gotten him back.
Yeah, it was, and we get to see him in the suit, like actually be Deathstroke, but not evil. Like it's quite wonderful. But yeah, the last episode actually sets up stakes again because we had so many characters for so long, and the season was not willing to kill anybody. That this episode, Prometheus and Company, which I think should be like a name of some kind of musical.
It's a steakhouse chain, I'm pretty sure. Prometheus and Company. Yeah.
Prometheus and Company kidnap all named characters of Arrow except for
and William's mom.
And William's mom, whose name I cannot remember.
So she's dead.
Yeah.
She's gonna die.
So he kidnaps all, or has his people kidnap all of them. And except for Malcolm Merlin. So Malcolm Merlin shows up to help Oliver because he only cares about Thea. And
this time.
What is he says he has the best line of the season. What does he say? He says, "I admire you, Oliver, because it takes a very special person to become dumber over time." Like, it's one of the best lines of the whole season. But yeah, he shows up to help Oliver rescue these people who have been, of course, taken to Lian Yu. They've been taken to the island because where else is any supervillain going to take anyone anywhere?
Somebody asks Oliver, "How did you know that they would be there?" Because there's no other location in this Arrowverse.
It's either Star City or the island, or Russia. Those are your three choices.
In a storytelling universe where there are literally infinite Earths, they went to Lian Yu.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But then, like, the end of the episode itself is only really cool insofar as Slade Wilson is in it, and I guess Digger Harkness is in it.
Oh,
he's brought back. Sort of the bland version of Digger Harkness.
And so the big question is, who's gonna die, right?
Yeah.
Because we feel pretty certain that Malcolm is toast because he stepped on a mine. Well, Thea stepped on a mine, and then he took Thea's place on the mine. So it's reasonable to expect that he would die. And as I said before, the fact that William's mom does have a name, but we don't know what it means. We can never remember what it is. Pretty clear cut that she's going to die too. But the real question is somebody else going to die?
Yeah, so the whole last episode so the whole season has been Prometheus trying to make Oliver admit that he's just as bad as Prometheus is, that he's just another serial killer. And that whole mission devolves into this last episode. Prometheus, Adrian Chase, wants Oliver to kill Prometheus, in order to prove that he is a bad person. My question is, how is this any different from when Oliver killed Damien Dark last season? Like, Oliver refuses to kill Prometheus because it would be admitting something, but he just killed Damien Dark, like, 1 year ago. So that's something that never really made sense to me as far as the end of this season goes. But then we also find out that Prometheus has, like, seeded the island with bombs. Again, he wants to blow up an island. This is very James Bond. He wants to blow up an island. And so he's, like, got this dead man switch attached to him that when Oliver kills him, that the whole island will blow up. And so there's this great, very tense standoff between Oliver and Prometheus on a boat with William, Oliver's son. Where Oliver shoots him in the foot. Like, he tries to make Oliver choose. He's like, your son or everyone else. And then Oliver just shoots him in the foot and is like, I don't have to make a choice. I can have both. But then Prometheus, pulls out the gun and kills himself. And that's the end of the episode. And so I remember, like, thinking, like, oh, like, all those characters they introduced? Like, they're gonna kill half of them. Like, they're gonna actually, like, have stakes again in this show. And that was, I think, a pretty effective ending for this season. Now, I mean, next season will, of course, disappoint me, but at the time I remember thinking, like, wow, like, this show actually managed to, like, pull it together at the last minute.
Well, I do think that the fate of all the characters being up in the air is a great contract renegotiation tool.
That's true. That is true. We could always just kill you in this episode. Yeah, that's true. They did confirm, though, that Malcolm Merlyn was dead shortly after.
Oh, that's right. That did happen.
Yeah.
But he's not gone for good.
Not the last time we'll see him, but he did technically die on Lian Yu.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if he doesn't die, that makes his, like, one connection with the, like, more pointless, right?
Yeah. I mean, there was just so many things in this episode with him that were so ridiculous. Like, he would say things like, I'm still your father. And I'm like, yeah, but you were a really terrible father. Like you did all of the things wrong for a father. But, I don't know. Like, it's very easy for me to buy into, the emotional impact of his death just because I like John Barrowman so much. Like, I can be hurt by Malcolm Merlyn so many times and I'll still, like, be sad when I see John Barrowman die. But do you want to talk about the last thing?
I was going to say, there is one thing that we have left out of this season that is going to come heavily into play in season 6. And it's dropped in as a as a mid-season storyline, but we get more into Felicity's history as a hacktivist, and the character of Elena is introduced. Her friend who works for Helix, and she comes to Felicity for help getting their leader out of prison, and his name is Caden James, who we'll talk a lot more about next season. So that also does happen in this season as well. And it's great fun, but not.
Arrow really does a good job of teasing the next season's villains.
And that's kind of the arc that Arrow has until now. The end of the end is the overlapping villain structure that we're going to have for the last few seasons.
And sometimes villains will introduce the next villain too, like Ra's al Ghul introduced Damien Dark. Prometheus is sort of tied up with Caden James. Like, there's all these sort of villains will sort of like cause other villains to happen.
Right, and really Oliver caused all of them. So,
right, he should have never come back from that island.
Okay, let's get to the still disappointing, but nowhere near as disappointing season of The Flash that actually has a lot more to do with the end goal of this podcasting series than this version of Arrow. So, The Flash Season 3. Now, The Flash Season 3 has at least one huge, amazing, wonderful new guest star.
Tom Felton?
Oh, yeah.
I was like Darren Criss? No, Tom Felton. I was just saying, because we were rewatching the episode where he's introduced, the music that they play when they introduce him, I think they actually gauged it to sound a little like the Harry Potter theme. Like, they're clearly playing up like the Draco Malfoy like relationship between him and Barry Allen. Like, he's like always 2 seconds away from yelling Potter at him. But
yeah, I'm trying to I think he's the only like actual like main character. Yeah.
Besides HR.
Well, yeah, but that's just Tom Cavanaugh over again.
Yeah, the new character that Tom Cavanaugh plays, because we're continuing this joke.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about HR, because this version of Wells is great.
Stupid Wells.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, I really like Stupid Wells. I like HR, but not only because he's actually a really funny and really genuine character. Like, he's actually really sweet in a lot of ways too. But it's such a different character than Harry, and it's a different character than the Eobard Thawne Harrison Wells from the very beginning. It's like they told Tom Cavanaugh, okay, you're going to do the opposite of what you've been doing so far. And he does a pretty good job. I mean, again, like, he's dumb. Like, he's not, he doesn't hold however many doctorates that Harry does. He's not a scientist. He's from what Earth is he from? Do we know? He's from the other Earth, playing into this gag.
Earth 19.
Earth 19, yeah. But he's like very emotionally intuitive. Like he has emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And I actually think it works. Like it is played off as a joke a lot. Like, he doesn't understand what they're talking about half the time. But like, I don't know. Like, how did you guys feel about him?
You know what else he does have in addition to emotional intelligence? He has a drumstick and a side shave.
That's true.
Yeah.
Hipster Wells.
That's right.
He loves coffee.
That's like another like running gag, is that almost on every other Earth, coffee is like forbidden or extinct.
That's right.
He like loves coffee. So, he's like always at gyms.
Right. But so every other character, like even Cisco's girlfriend, who is not Gypsy. Yeah. She loves coffee as well. Like it's because on every other Earth, coffee is gone.
Yeah, I think it's a great running
Yeah,
gag.
yeah. I really love the reveal that HR is a novelist.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that he's a novelist.
And so he's just constantly trying to figure out how to write a new novel based on his adventures over here. Like, I love that. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I mean, he becomes part of the team, and he kind of shows that, like, you don't have to be, like, this magical technical person or a superhero to be part of a team. Like, you can supply other things to a team as well. I mean, he definitely makes you care about him quite a bit as a character. Even though he's definitely not very smart.
Oh. And then we have Tom Felton as Julian Albert / Professor Alchemy.
Is it Professor or is it
Dr.
Doctor?
Alchemy.
Sorry, I got the honorifics messed up.
Some of us earned that degree.
Yeah.
That's a Harley Quinn reference for those of you who aren't familiar. Yeah, Dr. Alchemy. Although he doesn't know he's Dr. Alchemy at the very beginning.
Yeah, which I like. It's almost like they're trying to be like, okay, well, we can't have the new person be the villain this time. What do we do? Oh, let's just make it so he doesn't know. That way, we can have our cake and eat it too with the big reveal.
Yeah, but before we talk about Dr. Alchemy, we have to talk about the thing that relates most to Crisis, but also is the most disappointing part of this whole season.
Oh, yeah,
the first
you mean
episode.
you're right. You mean the only episode that they really have Flashpoint have any consequences?
Yeah, blink and you miss it. Flashpoint.
Yeah, so I mentioned this last time. The build up to this season, like, this is a very underwhelming answer to the build up to this season because, as I have mentioned before, I am not as well versed in DC lore as I am perhaps in Marvel lore, but even I knew what Flashpoint was, even though I hadn't read any of the Flashpoint comics. I know Sam has read Flashpoint and you've read Flashpoint, Andy, so I'll let you explain what that is, but I definitely was ready for something that was not this.
Okay.
When this
So, Flashpoint is this moment where Barry Allen runs back in time and stops his mother from being murdered. And in doing that, he screws up the entire timeline for everybody else. Barry gets what he wants, but everyone else has their happiness taken away from them, except for Oliver, who is never happy.
Can't take away what you don't have.
In the comics, it's this wonderful storyline that I encourage anyone to watch the animated DC film. It really does this storyline justice. Unlike Hush, which did not do that animation adaptation, did not do that story justice. But Flashpoint is good. The Flashpoint paradox. Basically, Barry.
Well, it's far-reaching too, right? Like, it affected all of the other comic lines.
Right, yeah. I mean, this is essentially that started like one of the reboots later on.
This doesn't the New 52 come out of Flashpoint?
Yeah.
But hey, if you just want a one episode, has nothing to do with the rest of the DC Universe version of that, look no further.
Yeah, and they tease this. They tease this so hard. Like, anyway, Barry screws up the time. He stops the Reverse Flash from killing his mother, and you find out that he has the Reverse Flash trapped.
Yeah, he's basically except for the whole wearing skin as a suit, he's become Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. Like, he's keeping this guy in a pit and, in a glass prison. And
has he just been feeding him Big Belly Burger this whole time?
Yeah, this is not good.
Well,
it's not a good look.
It's also Zoom's from the previous season. It's that the thing that Zoom used to keep the speedsters tied up.
I mean, that's the thing. Even the prison that he's in the last season of Flash is better than the one Barry has him in.
And then you get the Reverse Flash trying to warn him that Flashpoint is not a good idea, that it's gonna really mess up the timeline, and then he yells, "You're the villain, Flash!
Yeah,
You're
that
the villain!"
and that's some great acting right there. Is just the like you can just see this, and this is an Eobard Thawne who hated Barry enough to kill his mother, and you can just see him taking immense joy in this. It's one of the best parts of the season.
Well, and he loves that in order to fix it, he has to kill Barry's mother. Like, this idea that, like, now in order to be the hero, you have to commit this, like, terrible murder.
And, you know, I remember, and I really detested what they did here, because what they ended up doing was they took a one of the biggest stories from the DC franchise, which is Flashpoint. I mean, really, one of the I don't know. There are a few stories that are bigger than Flashpoint, and one of them is Crisis on Infinite Earths. So this ought to scare you. Is that they used Flashpoint in service of furthering narratives instead of as a reason to exist in itself. You know, they used Flashpoint to give Wally West his speed, to give Caitlin Killer Frost. But one thing they didn't do with Flashpoint is actually do Flashpoint. You know, Tessa and I talked about between the seasons leading up to Flashpoint, we talked about, oh wow, how many episodes is Flashpoint going to be? Is Flashpoint going to be all the way up to the crossover? Is the crossover going to be the thing that fixes Flashpoint? Which is, I think, what we both thought was going to happen. And then the question was, well, how's that going to affect Arrow? How is Arrow going to do Flashpoint? And, you know, for a show that kind of was starting to run on fumes creatively at the end of season 4, it was like, well, Arrow will be reinvigorated by the Flashpoint thing, and we can all reset it halfway through, and it'll be more or less fine. And then, you know, it's like Jeffrey D. Morgan, who played Thomas Wayne in Batman Superman. You know, it's like, he's a TV actor. He could actually do Thomas. Would they give them Thomas Wayne? You know, I thought Annette O'Toole would have been a great, not only a Smallville alum, she would have been a great Martha. You know, like, we could have had all of this. It'd be a way of. I was really excited about it. In retrospect, I really should not have been. This is exactly what we should have known was going to happen. This is Arrowverse at its absolute worst.
Yeah, taking something that's beautiful and just sort of being like, well,
whatever.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Sort of.
Well, but isn't it funny that Sarah Diggle's now John Jr.?
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is that, like, there were no real stakes to this, and this was what I complained about Arrow as well. So in the second episode, well, at the end of Flashpoint, right? So Barry figures out that he has made a mistake, and he goes back and he allows Reverse Flash to kill his mother, which is pretty heart-wrenching. I mean, basically all Barry did in this scene is allow his mother's death to become worse. Did you all notice that? Like, basically, this is how Nora Allen's death plays out to her now. She's attacked by a man in a yellow suit who has super speed. She is saved by a man in a red suit who has super speed and who says that he will never kill her again and that it is going to be all right. And then the guy in the yellow suit shows back up again and kills her. So everything that has been said, like, it literally just tortures her now. Instead of her just dying, she's now tortured by all of these different people coming in and saying that it's going to be okay, but it's not okay. And so it's like this really weird, heart-wrenching scene. But then Barry goes back to the present, right? And everything's fine. Except it's not fine. There's a bunch of people who are mad at him for various reasons. And Diggle's child is now a boy instead of a girl. So instead of baby Sarah, we have baby John.
How?
And
I'm still trying to figure out how. Like, I get the idea, like, something happened and, you know, the intimate moment that led to the baby was delayed by 10 seconds or something. But
well, we remembered what we did is we remembered in the previous season of Legends that we had a John Jr., so we needed to go back and fix that.
But like, here's the thing, is that, like, like, I get it. Like, one of the things that works really well for Flashpoint as a story is this idea that if you go back in time and you change anything, even if you change it back, there's no way you can account for all the variables, right?
Yeah.
Time is a very delicate thing. Even if you make something better, there's no guarantee that, like, other things won't change. But they picked all of, like, the most low-stakes things to change. Like, Cisco's brother is dead. His brother that we haven't seen since season 1 and really didn't really remember until they brought him back up this season.
The Pied Piper is a friend.
The baby's different. Yeah, the Pied Piper is a friend.
Iris and Dad Civil War.
Yeah, they don't talk to each other. The only interesting thing that really came out of all of this in terms of this point of the season before Dr. Alchemy gets involved is that Killer Frost exists, because we get that moment at the end of the second episode where we see Caitlin, with her hands freezing over. That's it. Like, I mean, they weren't even willing to change anything major in the Flash.
No.
Problem.
And this is a problem with, like, TV, these long run TV shows in general, is they always want to go back to the status quo in some way.
Yeah. And I don't know, like, I felt like these shows were more willing to take risks in the earlier seasons than they were.
This is only season 3 though.
I know. But, I mean, the thing that it does give us, right, is that then we get and then Tom Felton, that's the other result of Flashpoint, is that he now has a coworker who hates him.
Who is a metahuman CSI.
Yes, played by Tom Felton. So, Julian Albert.
Who is Dr. Alchemy.
Who is Dr. Alchemy.
Which is where we started.
And again, we don't figure that out until later. But Dr. Alchemy, the new villain that's been teased, is going around restoring people to their Flashpoint counterpoints. So, there's a villain in Flashpoint called the Rival, and Dr. Alchemy goes and finds the person who was the rival in the alternate timeline and gives him super speed. There's, Wally, who is obviously not powered in the original timeline, was Kid Flash in Flashpoint, and that's a huge part of the first episode, is seeing him in the Kid Flash outfit.
Yes, he was Kid Flash. Don't call me Kid Flash.
But that's what we call you.
Even though there's no Flash.
Even though there's no Flash. So it didn't really make sense. But then Dr. Alchemy finds Wally and puts him in a husk. Is that what he's doing to people? He's like cocooning them. And when they come out...
It's another Good Place reference.
No, this is clearly Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Okay.
And then when they come out, they're the Flashpoint version, right? So Wally now has super speed and he becomes Kid Flash. And so, yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but at the same time, it seems barely... I mean, we're not even really given a reason for why this is happening. I mean, we know later that it turns out Dr. Alchemy's working for someone else, but it just seems kind of weird, like this... Like, we're going to remind the Flash that he had all these people had a different timeline. I don't know.
And would you believe, I want to know, Andy, Tessa, do you remember this? That in this season of Flash, there's a Philosopher's Stone.
Yes. That's the thing that starts the entire thing for Julian, is he was a fucking, like, rich kid archaeologist, Indiana Jonesing it. Out in the middle of nowhere, and he finds the Philosopher's Stone.
Both property. And by the way, just let's remember that the first book is entitled Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Tom Felton cannot get away from that damn stone.
It is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Thank you very much.
Only if you're American.
Yeah.
No, really, like they were like, Americans are too stupid to know what the Philosopher's Stone is.
Wait, what is the Philosopher's Stone?
It's the alchemy thing.
Oh, is that why he's called Dr. Alchemy?
Yeah. I know. Well, but here's the thing though, Tom Felton has so much goodwill, and he's actually really delightful, I think. Even though, like, everything about his character is stupid. He's actually really great. Like, Julian Albert is a great character. Dr. Alchemy is a terrible villain. But Julian Albert's a great character.
Also, like, it does a good job of, like, showing that if you were to work with Barry Allen, you would fucking hate this dude.
Like if you had to share a room with him.
Oh my god!
Right.
Like
I have to share a TV screen with him, and I hate him.
Here's the thing. When people bring up that, like, oh yeah, you think Jim Halpert from The Office is funny, but if you had to work with him, you would hate him.
By the way, everybody, Andy, the world, Tessa started watching The Office last night.
I've never seen it before.
Yeah, that pilot's a hard
The
experience.
first season's a hard experience.
It's only 6 episodes. We can make it.
Hey,
But your point is really good. He really is the Jim Halpert of the Arrowverse, isn't he? You have stumbled onto something.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know. Like, and of course, this introduces the theme of everybody is mad at Barry for the rest of the season because of Flashpoint.
Except
They
for Kara.
should be.
Except for Kara. Well, and we're not going to talk about the crossover this episode. We're talking about it next episode. But this even gets into the crossover where when people find out about Flashpoint, they are mad about it, and it's because Barry makes a very selfish decision, which I think
understandable decision, though, is the thing.
Well, I love how he's like, I had a bad moment.
So you had a bad day.
And his metabolism is so fast, he can't just get drunk and forget about it. Like, so, I mean, it's really on them.
But, I will say, it's the second episode. In the second episode, Cisco has some really great, like, he's the one that I think really turns, like, this guilt on to Barry. Because even though, again, I just didn't care about his brother. Like, I was like, wait, he had a brother? He's able to say, like, wait, you've been telling me for months you can't go back in time to save my brother, but you went back in time and saved your mother. And I think that actually works really well. I mean, for all the bad things they do with Flashpoint, the fact that they were able to take Cisco and have him be sort of the one that says, no, this was a really selfish choice. Like, and if we think about it, this does say something about time travel in general. The idea that inherently, if time travel is possible, isn't it usually kind of a selfish choice? Like, you think that you're the one who can make the world better by changing this one thing that affects you?
Not a single Back to the Future 2 sports almanac reference in this couple of episodes, which is like, they even draw the timeline thing on the board, just like Doc does, but they don't even point out that selfishness, using time travel for selfish reasons never ends up good. Yeah.
Although, I will say we do get Jay Garrick. So the real Jay Garrick, if you remember, he was, Zoom was, an imposter, Jay Garrick.
The Man in the Iron Mask.
The Man in the Iron Mask.
Also played by John Wesley Shipp.
Yeah, so John Wesley Shipp returns as Jay Garrick. In the first episode, as Flashpoint, he's actually the one that second episode. He's actually the one that pulls, so Barry tries to go back again to fix the thing that he broke. And Jay Garrick pulls him out and is like, okay, let me explain to you how time travel works.
And he takes him to a cafe where Dawson's Creek is playing in the background. So
yeah, there's some really great pop culture things going on in the second episode. And so yeah, we get this. I think that there are some things that work about the Flashpoint episodes, but ultimately, like, the hype, unfortunately, of this particular storyline, like, they just could have done so many things that they didn't do. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's an interesting concept that they just throw out and kind of shit on immediately. They do handle Killer Frost so well in the episode directed by Kevin Smith, because all the best Flash episodes are directed by Kevin Smith. When Killer Frost finally, like, comes out and fully envelops everything, that's a great moment, and it's just a great moment because also Wally West has been in the cocoon, and Joe, who, God bless him, just decides that he's going to risk Wally's life and crack open the cocoon. So, this was I thought this was probably like one of the better episodes of the season.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you a little bit, Andy, about the Killer Frost thing.
Okay, and why is that?
I do like Kevin Smith a lot, and I think that there were a few good episodes this season. I really do want to talk about Duet, especially, but I have a problem with the way Killer Frost was handled, and part of it may be the fact that they were relying a little bit too much on the comics for Killer Frost's source material, and they didn't know how to reconcile that with the character that they had already created with Caitlin Snow. So I'm gonna try to say this in a way that makes sense. I have a real problem with the way that her gaining her powers is equated with her becoming a villain almost immediately. Especially because in the very same episode, Wally gains his powers. He, like you said, Joe breaks him out of the cocoon. He immediately has these amazing speed powers, and he just becomes Kid Flash in like 2 episodes. And, he's automatically considered to be a superhero because he has this speed that seems like it's the Flash. And I don't know, maybe because he's male. But Caitlin gets these powers, and immediately everybody tries to tell her that she needs to suppress them, that she's going to become evil, just like Earth 2, Killer Frost. And they don't even try to say things like, oh, you have superpowers, that's great, let's learn how to use them for the good of everybody, you can be part of the team now. This entire season becomes them saying, no, you gotta suppress your powers, you gotta wear this necklace that's going to make you not use your Killer Frost powers because they must be evil. And to me, this just I know Killer Frost is a villain in the comics. But the way they introduced it here, without giving her a specific reason for being evil, just saying oh, you have a split personality and she's evil, it reminded me way too much of some of the problems with other female empowerment storylines in other comics, like Scarlet Witch, for an example, in House of M, where her insanity is sort of attributed to her power, or Dark Phoenix, which is obviously a really great classic comic, but her insanity, again, is attributed to her power. And so, to me, this didn't read well. They didn't do enough work to convince me that this character should become a villain. In fact, I kind of think she became a villain because all of the men in her life told her she couldn't use her powers. That's kind of what I got from this season, was that everybody was just oh no, Caitlin can't have powers, she'll be evil. Instead of trying to actually have a conversation with her about okay, how are you planning on using these powers? You could use them for good, let's train you. I mean, do you think that's fair to kind of say that they messed up this character a little bit?
Okay.
I mean, you
no. And I always love hearing things that, because I'm a white dude, I don't pay attention to. It just doesn't read for me. So hearing about how these things are, one thing I will say is I think they tried to capture the fear of having another personality with her having these powers and not realizing how to use them. That they try to parallel that fear, and it doesn't always work. I'll tell you what I really, next season, when Killer Frost actually becomes a real character and not just a trope. But yeah, I do think that they kind of just assumed that she was a villain because she goes off and even her mother is terrified of her, kind of a thing, and her mother's, for the most part, she's terrible to Caitlin altogether.
Yeah, and again, maybe if they didn't parallel her gaining her powers so much with Wally, it wouldn't stand out so much, because again, they're all about Wally becoming Kid Flash. They're here, let's get you a suit. We can't get you a suit fast enough. But for Killer Frost, they're wear this necklace. You can't. It's very Frozen.
There is a relationship to Frozen, but there's also a relationship to the first season of Supergirl. Because you think about these ideas of Oliver's not a good example, but you think about Barry and Wally. And you could even think about Superman, implied in Supergirl. is that when these characters are super powered, they're gifts, they're heroes. You know, Kara has one bad day in season 1 of Supergirl, and she's a villain all of a sudden. She has to prove herself. There's a there's a real thing about women and power that scares a lot of people, and they used it in Supergirl season 1, and they use it here, to lean into it. There's no real reason to think that her powers are going to be any different. There's nothing inherent in the powers that are going to make her evil, just like there's nothing inherent in anybody else's powers. But for some reason, good, pure, nice, mild-mannered Caitlin, as soon as she gets powers, will watch out.
Yeah, and I don't know. I remember thinking as I was watching this the first time, I was like, maybe this is all like some sort of meta commentary about women and powers, and like everyone's gonna apologize to her at the end of the season. But I think I was giving them way too much credit.
No, still hasn't happened. This was in November of 2016.
Yeah, nobody ever apologizes for telling her that she needs to suppress her powers for half the season. Like, that never happens. And even though there is a lot of development, like you said, in later seasons with Killer Frost, and by the way, I like Killer Frost in later seasons. She's great. But it really bothers me that they're doing all this stuff with Barry and gender, in Duet and with Supergirl, where he's like, this isn't a gendered thing. But yet there's this really, really gendered way in which they don't do Killer Frost justice. And again, it's not that she becomes a villain. It's that we need more justification for her being a villain than just she's a woman with superpowers.
And it's kind of the idea that they just throw like, it's a different personality. We're done.
Yeah, there needed to be more. It's like the end of Game of Thrones. This would make sense if you did more work to explain why this makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, great. Now I need to rewatch it to find out. And I do remember that Killer Frost pretty much goes off and is just like, hey, I'm going to figure this out. Like, I'm going to find out who Dr. Alchemy is. And she pretty much does it. Like...
Oh yeah, she does in like one episode what they were trying for half the season to do. Which, I mean, it again might have been Kevin Smith.
And the reveal at the end of the episode is that Julian is Dr. Alchemy. And then the crossover happens. And then after the crossover, that's when we really start getting Savitar.
Emo Berry.
We don't know that yet.
Oh, well, he's still Emo Berry.
Yeah, so what did you think of Savitar?
Okay. First of all, why do you have to keep throwing speedsters as the main villains?
Yeah, they really needed to pace themselves on the speedsters. I remember thinking, not again, when I was watching this third season.
And the thing is earlier in the season, part of the reason why I think everyone is convinced that Killer Frost is going to be a villain is Cisco vibes and sees him and Killer Frost fighting, right? Right?
Oh yeah.
So that's one of the things, and that is proven to be pretty much false right away, like a bad imagery, and then we get this vision of the future where Iris dies, and I was like, oh, well, if they do this, I'm gonna like the show a lot more.
Well, again, they're teasing us with stakes, right? Like this idea that, oh yeah, we might kill a main character. Like this show might actually mean something. We'll talk about how that ends up in a little bit. But pretty much Julian ends up joining Team Flash, and you find out that he didn't know he was Dr. Alchemy, and he is like a romantic interest with Caitlin. A really good one. Once again, Caitlin with her bad track record of romantic interests. Yeah. And then the best idea for a romantic interest, they just don't follow next season. I ship Dibney and Caitlin, but
that's not here. We also get Jesse Quick.
We'll have to talk about that next time. We'll have to talk about that. I'm interested.
We also get
Jesse
Quick, which is pretty awesome. The Attack on Gorilla City, Attack on Central City double whammy with Gorilla Grodd is wonderful. I had a lot of fun watching these episodes.
Yeah, and we get to see Tom Cavanaugh return to the season 2 version of Harrison Wells, or 2 version Harrison Wells. So he gets to play like multiple characters. And we also, is this the first season we get the Council of Wells? As well? No, is that next season?
No, that's with that's with the next one.
Okay, never mind. We'll come back to that. But yeah, we get to see Tom Cavanaugh play.
No, we do get the Council of Wells. We get Hell's Wells at least.
Oh, we do get the Council of Wells this season.
We get a few of them. The francophone, the French Wells. I'm looking at the list on the Flash Wiki here. Yeah, you get the Southern Wells, the the francophone Wells. Yeah, and that's about it. So
yeah, you get, but it's like letting Tom Cavanaugh do his thing. So he gets to play multiple characters. But yeah, I mean, one of the best, I mean, we've talked a lot about like father-son relationships on these shows, but Harry and Jesse are clearly one of the better father-daughter relationships. And of course, Wally and Jesse date after sort of teasing it for a season and a half. So if you ever wanted to know what a real long distance relationship looks like, it turns out you can date someone on another Earth.
And then we get Savitar, and Barry goes into the Speed Force, and there's this thing about what is it? Jay Garrick basically letting himself be tortured by the Speed Force, right?
Well, somebody has to.
Apparently someone, again, this is another example of the Speed Force sort of being whatever the episode needs it to be. And I guess there always has to be a speedster inside the Speed Force. Like the Speed Force has a prison.
Well, I think that was a direct result of Flashpoint.
Right.
They don't do a good job explaining it.
So Savitar was in the prison. And all we know about Savitar is that he calls himself the god of speed. And that he's like this giant metal thing. And he's been in this prison, but he's been also talking to people. Like Dr. Alchemy, like controlling Dr. Alchemy. But then he basically tricks Wally into letting him out of the prison, but Wally has to take his place. So Wally is now in the Speed Force. And then Jay Garrick takes Wally's place.
And then we get the best crossover episode ever. Do it.
Yes. Which is a Glee reunion.
Right. You have Darren Criss playing the villain Music Meister, who, as I also prefer the Batman Brave and Bold version of the Music Meister, who is voiced by Neil Patrick Harris, but that's just me.
I love Darren Criss, so I really liked it, and I also just liked this episode was a solid episode. I tend to like musical episodes, so that's not really surprising. I mean, if you think about some of the best episodes of shows, a lot of times the musical episodes usually stand out. Buffy, of course, famously has a really great musical episode. Supernatural has a really good musical episode. Grey's Anatomy, not so much, but I mean, I guess some people really like that episode. But Darren Criss, I think what also I liked about this was that Darren Criss, Music Meister, he is a villain, but then like
he's not.
But he's not a villain.
He's not a villain at all.
And I think that was just really nice to see in the middle of like 2 seasons, 1 season of Supergirl, 1 season of Flash, that were just like very relentlessly about these villains that weren't that great. To have just like this really, really cool person that you weren't really sure what his motives are for most of the episode, but then he's just like, I actually just believe in love at the end. And I don't know, like it's a very nice encapsulated episode. But yeah, I mean, both Grant Gustin and Melissa Benoist are Glee alum, as well as Darren Criss, and they all sing. Jesse L. Martin sings. Victor Garber is in it, and he sings.
John Barrowman.
John
Barrowman is in it, and he sings. And of course, like, this is all a delusion. So the Music Meister basically puts the whammy on both Supergirl and Flash. So they're in these comas, and they're in a shared sort of hallucination where they're in a musical. Because it turns out, of course, Kara and Barry like musicals. Because they're the most optimistic people in the Arrowverse.
Well, and that's the great thing about this episode, but it's also kind of a bad thing in general, is that because the spotlight is on Kara and Barry, Kara brings out the best in Barry. Like, we were watching this, and I thought that these two characters work really well together. They're really great. I really like both of them. And then I realized, actually, I don't really like Barry. I like him when he's with Kara. When, and it's very, very bad, and I think, Andy, you'll probably agree, is that this relationship that they have as friends really highlights why his relationship with Iris is such a bummer. They just don't have the chemistry.
My favorite part of the episode is when they sing Super Friends together.
Written by Rachel Bloom, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just a solid episode. I mean, and like, it's like they said, who wants to sing? And then, like, they just took whoever wanted to sing and put them in the episode. But part of it is that they're both characters are working through issues in their romantic lives. Kara, we'll talk about her stuff with Supergirl later, but she's having a romantic issue. Barry Allen, he proposes to Iris, but then rescinds his proposal.
He proposed to her because he thought if they got married, the headline would be false and she wouldn't die.
Yes.
Right.
Is that right?
Yes.
Is that it?
And then when he realizes that it doesn't change anything, he rescinds his proposal. And of course, that causes him to get kicked out of the apartment that they now share. And so, like, basically the Music Meister, who is this, like, it doesn't even really explain what kind of being he is. He's just very all-powerful, it seems like. But he just comes out of nowhere, and he's like, I'm gonna fix your relationship issues by making you have a shared hallucination about musicals. And by the end of it,
if you watch Supergirl, you're also very steeped in the Batman mythos. He's basically Mr. Mxyzptlk.
I was wondering about that. Is he the same character?
Yeah, or Batmite.
Okay.
Like, I prefer to think of this version of the Music Maestro as Batmite.
But yeah, and he even helps Wally while he's there, because Wally is, of course, scarred from being in this Speed Force, and so he helps Wally get his mojo back.
And just to tell listeners who are listening, Batmite is a ninth dimensional or fifth dimensional being who is a huge fan of Batman. And he just loves Batman. And he comes in and kind of magics up Batman's world. And, being a fan of Batman, he wants Batman to fight the best villains and stuff. There's a few episodes of The Brave and the Bold with him. There's a few other instances of Batmite. He's so much fun. If you watch the Teen Titans cartoon way back in the early aughts, there's a Robin Mite who pops in too. It's just a lot of fun. So that's how I feel about the Music Maestro. I can't remember which one it is. That he's a fan who wants the best, but he also wants to be a part of it. He wants his own fan fiction, kind of.
Yeah, but it's just really interesting because, at the beginning, because this actually starts at the end of the episode of Supergirl that happens before this. Like, it's sort of teased at the end where he shows up and he, puts her into a coma, and then he disappears, and then we see the after effect of that in this episode of Flash. But he's just very I'm going to teach you a lesson. And of course, that sounds really sinister when coming from a villain. But at the end, he's like, I told you I'd teach you a lesson. You're all happy now, right? And I don't know, I felt good after watching this episode, and I did not feel good after watching most episodes of this season. It's just very heartwarming. Also, it made me want to watch Rent again after watching Jesse L. Martin.
But also, you want like a depressing musical after watching a happy musical.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Sam has not seen Rent, and so I told him that it would make him cry, but that it is worth watching. It's so good.
Else in this season worth talking about besides the end?
Gypsy. Can we talk about Gypsy real quick? Gypsy is the love interest for Cisco this season. She is a breacher. So Cisco's powers as Vibe are really accelerated this season. Like, he's able to breach to other Earths fairly easily. And so, which of course makes the crossovers a lot easier. But then we find out there are other breachers, other people who have very similar powers to him. On other Earths. So Gypsy is a bounty hunter who comes from another Earth to find HR, the stupid Wells, and she's great. She comes to find him, and she's very no nonsense, and she's very powerful. But then she has a duel with Cisco over HR, whether he gets to stay or go, and like they have this really great chemistry. I don't know, like, especially after seeing the flirtation with Hawk Girl last season, which was not really great. It was really nice to see him actually get a love interest, but not only a love interest, but someone who is actually like a pretty funny character, like in her own right. And we'll of course see her again. I think she shows up a couple times this season, and she's more
with her amazing father.
Yes, who's gonna be back?
Yeah, so the end of all of this comes into this... Oh, wait, we didn't even discuss who Savitar actually is.
Emo Barry.
It's very confusing. So I will say this does have to do with Crisis. This is the first time we see Barry run forward into the future, right?
Yes.
So after basically getting nowhere with Savitar, which the scene with Iris dying... where Savitar kills her, it works very similarly to the scene with the grave in season 4 of Arrow. You know, where we saw the grave at the beginning and we were like, who's in the grave? It's not obviously that mysterious because we know who dies, but it sort of works that way. Like, they're all trying to prevent Iris's death for the rest of the season. And we learned that because Barry tries everything and can't change anything because he won't go back in time, which is probably good. He goes forward in time, because that's better, somehow. And he discovers that Savitar is actually himself. So, in order to defeat Savitar, at some point in the future, he creates a bunch of time remnants, which you will remember from last season is how he defeated Zoom by creating a time remnant. But apparently he creates a bunch of them to defeat Savitar. And in doing so, one of the time remnants survives and decides that he hates Barry and becomes evil. So in order to defeat Savitar, he creates Savitar. Did this make any more sense to anyone?
It made perfect sense. You
me.
just aren't paying enough attention. Lady who corrected me about Arrow season 5 and clearly pays more attention to all this.
Yeah, and it's also clearly a metaphor for Paradise Lost and free will too. So,
well, and you can tell he's evil because he has the anime hair, the swoop over his eye, which is also blind. Again, using disability as a marker of evil. But yeah, Savitar is Barry. That's it. That's the big reveal.
Evil. He's other Barry.
He's other Barry. Archer. Yes.
That's a much better other.
That is
Barry
a much
than
better
this one.
other Barry. But yeah, no, he's other Barry. And Killer Frost works for him for like an episode.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, this is just kind of a nothing thing. Like, it's like, oh, cool. This is. it's other Barry, and somehow it's like, I lost my iris, now you're gonna lose yours. Yeah.
But you also killed Iris. Yeah, it's very confusing. And again, this is them using time travel to explain things that.
I mean, this is them being lazy writers. Like, let's just. So, okay, yeah, that's who Savitar is. It's this big reveal, and Barry beats him by surprising him, phasing into the suit, and kind of slapping him out of the suit.
And there's a bazooka involved at some point. Less said about that, the better.
Oh, but
right. He's the They bring up a face disguiser that HR uses because his face is kind of wanted everywhere, like really, really, a wanted man. So he creates a face that everyone else can just see who it is. It doesn't make any sense, but it's clearly it's so broadcast that this is what's happening. And HR gets a love interest, and then he decides to do something good and pretend to be Iris, so Savitar kills him.
Yeah, and I actually remember this being one of the more emotionally affecting moments of the season, because not only because HR is a great character, but also because, again, it really highlighted to me this idea that you don't necessarily have to be the super smart genius that Cisco and Caitlin are, or the brawny or super powered people that Barry and Wally and Jesse are. You can be a hero by just making these types of sacrifices, which I thought worked. I actually thought worked really well this season. In a season where not a lot made sense, this made sense.
Is there anything else to talk about?
At the end of the season, Barry gets put in the Speed Force prison, and that's where. So he's gone, but I'm sure he'll be back at the beginning of the next season.
They changed the entire name of the show to The Kid Flash.
That would have been kind of fun.
That would have been stakes.
Yeah, that would But yeah, I mean, is there anything really Crisis related besides Flashpoint, besides the running forward into the future?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, these two seasons just weren't that great, in my opinion. These were definitely lackluster. I do remember by the end of season 3 of The Flash, they had announced that season 4's villain would not be a speedster, which I was extremely happy about at the time. And I like the villain for next season. So, I mean, I like parts of the villain for next season. But I do remember at the end of season 3 being please, please, please let it not be another speedster.
Yeah. So how do you rank the seasons of Flash?
For a show I like so much, I can't decide which ones I actually like as far as seasons go. That's troubling. Season 2 better than season 1? I think it is. Yeah. Season 2 and season 1 are really high up there. And then season 3...
Okay, so Sam, you're 2-1-3. Okay,
I
Tessa?
think so.
I think I'm going to have to agree. I think there are elements of 2 that work better than elements of 1. But 1 was still pretty good. 1 is... It would either be 2 or 1 that's the best, for sure. But I like Harry a lot in season 2, so that kind of puts it over the edge for me. Season 3 was definitely a disappointment after season 2.
So you're 2-1-3 as well. Especially. And I'm actually 1-2-3.
Yeah. I think that's a fair
now,
choice too.
How would you rank the currently covered seasons of Arrow?
Oh God. 2, 1, 4, 3, 5. Would we? Because Damien Dark's better than Ra's al Ghul,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that seems right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Slade Wilson's the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think, Sam?
Well, you could even go 2, 4, 1, 3, 5.
You'd put 4 above 1?
Wow.
Maybe.
Wow.
I don't
some
know.
Hot takes
Maybe.
coming in here.
It sounds weird. Yeah. Damien Dark was good.
Yeah, that's true.
Tommy Merlin was not.
Well, I'm gonna put it as 2, 1, 4, 5, 3. I really did not like season 3.
That's fair. I really didn't like season 5. So yeah. I will say though that this is definitely like we've been hating a lot on Flash and Arrow seasons. It's going to get better. If you're listening to this and you're like, man, I'm just like bummed out right now. I think that we're in the low points for both of these shows.
Yep, and that's why they'll tune in next week when we cover Supergirl season 2 and Legends of Tomorrow season 2. Other than that, do you guys have any pluggables? Sam, I know you have at least one thing you should plug.
But my Twitter, you can find me at Sam_Morris9.
It's a little different than what he had last time. My Twitter is Suela Tessa.
You can find me on Twitter at Hebrews Pale Ale. You can find the podcast wherever fine podcasts are downloaded at Geek 101 Podcast. That's all for today. Class dismissed.